Welcome to Linked, a podcast where we link you, the community, with known issues that affect our community and everyone around us. I'm your host, Jose Madrigal. February being National Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, we're here today with Alyssa Olivera. She is a Prevention Education Service Supervisor and Campus Advocate for Bakersfield College. Alyssa, thank you so much for being here.
Most definitely. Thank you for having me.
All right, so we're just going to jump right into it. What is your role at the Alliance Against Family Violence?
Sure. So like you said, I'm the Prevention Education Services Supervisor. So my department's in charge of all the prevention education through like community and school and things like that, just doing like presentations and awareness building, things to really get people to understand the issues. And then I'm also the campus advocate at Bakersfield College. So I do the direct client services with students there to make sure that they're connected to whatever services they're needing on and off campus when they're dealing with issues of like sexual misconduct.
Okay. And what is the prevention? What type of prevention do you offer?
Yeah, for sure. So with prevention, it's actually like a 3-tier system. So you have primary prevention, which is where my department primarily functions. And this is like training and presentations and building like understanding before victimization occurs to try to make it never happen to begin with, to kind of like get students and folks to understand like what is dating violence or what is sexual assault so that they never find themselves in those situations, both like on the victim side and the perpetration side. And then there's secondary prevention, which is like immediate service. And this would be like our case management department or like me when I do direct client services with students to immediately stop the violence from occurring or happening again. And then you have tertiary prevention, which is long-term prevention. So this would be like counseling services to like fully unpack and process and heal from whatever happened and hope that you never find yourself in that situation again.
Do you find yourself primarily dealing with people like on who are in school? Is that where you get most of your
So for me, because I'm a campus advocate, most of my clients, all of my clients are college students. We also have an advocate over at CSUB that handles the university students, but I definitely get the community college students for sure.
Please explain a little bit about the chat team.
Yeah, so our chat department works with all of our clients that are minors, so 0 to 17. They can serve anything. And the good thing about the chat team, so over at the Alliance as a whole, primarily we're serving victims and survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and human trafficking. But with our chat department, sure, they see a lot of the same things, anyone 0 to 17 that are experiencing the same things, but they actually don't have the same like constrictions that we do. So they can serve pretty much anybody that's experienced a traumatic event that's really like putting them in those trauma responses. So they can see a variety of people. And like I said, 0 to 17, it's actually pretty amazing how they're able to do therapy with such young children. I've seen them sometimes and I'm like, whoa, like how do you do that with a child? But they make progress and some of the things they do are quite amazing.
And is this through a referral program, or how do you come in contact with, let's just say, high school students who are experiencing domestic violence or any type of violence? Yeah,
so over at the Alliance, actually, I think this is important for anyone to know. Anyone over the age of 12 can walk through our doors by themselves and receive services, so they don't need their parents there. Of course, it's helpful when they do, because it makes everything a lot smoother. Who's going to bring them to their appointments, right? But anybody can seek services on their own. And so it can be somebody walking in to either the Alliance Outreach Center or the Family Justice Center, where we also do have some of our case managers. It can also be a referral either through hotline. Let's say they stumbled upon our number and just want to give them a call. That information will go to our case managers as well. Or they can, like, if they tell like a social worker or one of their teachers or something, and they can contact us too. There's a variety of ways that we can reach out and meet students. It's just they have to reach out to us.
Can you tell us a little bit about what is dating violence? Can you define that so that people...
Yeah, for sure. So dating violence and intimate partner violence and domestic violence, they all kind of deal with the same theme, and it's exerting power and control over another individual within a relationship. So with dating violence, it's you're currently dating, you have dated, kind of everywhere in between, seen each other a couple times, to long-term steady relationship kind of a thing. And it's going back to that power and control, because that's like the main component to the abuse.
All right. So can you list the different types of abuse that somebody in a dating relationship can possibly go through?
Yeah, for sure. So the thing that people generally think of is the physical abuse, right? The hitting, the shoving, the pushing. That's what people often think of when they think of dating violence or domestic violence. But just there's so much more. So within the physical abuse, there's things that people don't think of. So blocking your exits or not allowing you to leave. That's a form of physical abuse that people don't really think of. Or driving recklessly. Who would think that driving recklessly is physical abuse? But the reality is, like, a car is very dangerous, right? And so if somebody just wants to be like, oh, you want to leave me, or whatever it is that they're going on about, and they just start speeding or zigzagging or all these things, and that causes a lot of fear in people. So that's another form of physical abuse, for sure.
It's also, let's just say, breaking traction when they're leaving or pulling out, however you want to say it.
Yeah, exactly. Anything that kind of causes like intimidation or fear. Yeah, definitely. And then you have the psychological and emotional. And this is what we actually find stays with people a lot longer because it's like the put downs, the attacking their self-esteem, the gaslighting. That's so just, it stays with people. And it takes a long time to heal from that.
I've heard the term gaslighting before. I don't really know what that is. Can you please explain that to me?
A lot of people don't.
I probably went through it, but I don't know.
Yeah,
Let
for sure.
know.
Yeah, so gaslighting, it actually is a term that comes from like an old movie where it's like systematically trying to make somebody think that they're crazy. Oh. So like in the movie, the husband's trying to make the wife think that she's crazy by like moving things around and saying that he didn't do it, so she must have done it and doesn't remember. So in relationships, we'll see this like you get in an argument and then they say something like really cruel or just mean just to get at you. And then later it like dwells on you and you're like, it really hurt when you said that. And they're like, I never said that. Or you're remembering it wrong. That didn't happen. And it's like, no, did it happen? So you start second guessing yourself and then thinking, okay, maybe I don't know what's going on. And then this person just has further control and manipulation over you. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. And then there's so many types of abuse.
Yeah, that does bring it on.
Yeah. So another thing is sexual abuse. And further than just like, not just, but like sexual violence as a whole. So you have rape, sexual assault, of course, but you also have things like tampering with birth control that people not realize is definitely abusive behavior, or stealthing, which is removing a condom during sex without letting your partner know, which violates the terms of the consent, right? And then there's also digital abuse, which is definitely newer compared to everything else. But with technology where it is now, everyone's online doing everything, right? Everyone has social media, everyone has multiple platforms that they use. And so digital abuse is using those platforms to further abuse or stalk your partner or your ex-partner, whatever it is. So controlling what their social media looks like, what they can post, who they can follow, those sorts of things. But also using it to like track them and see what they're doing. And another popular one that we see, especially with teenagers, is let me look in your phone. Let me see what you're doing. Who are you talking to? Let me see what you're texting. Where everyone has a right to privacy.
Right.
So those sorts of things are definitely abusive behaviors.
Now, do you think that, and just to throw in a little bit about the pandemic that's going on right now, do you feel like there has been a rise as far as throughout the current county as far as the sexual abuse?
Oh, for sure. I would say abuse across the board has definitely grown. And part of that is just people are all inside. So domestic violence as a whole, for sure. I'm sure teen dating violence. I would say the only thing that we're probably seeing a little bit less than normal is like stalking cases. But even still, with social media being what it is, it's very easy to find where people are, what's going on in their lives, and keeping tabs on them that way.
Can you explain some of the cycles of violence that happen when someone is dating and they are in an abusive relationship?
Yeah, definitely. So, not to like geek out, but I love the cycle of violence.
All right.
So the cycle of violence is actually two cycles that I like to talk about here. And so the first one is when you're in the relationship, right? So this is, you have three parts. You have the honeymoon phase. Everything's perfect. Everything's grand, right? It's called the honeymoon phase for a reason. You're in love. Everything's perfect.
My favorite.
Right? Everyone's favorite. Then you have the tension building phase. And this is what people often describe as like walking on eggshells. It's like something feels off, but you don't know what it is, and you're like, an argument is coming, like you can see the storm clouds kind of a thing, like you know what's coming, and then that leads to the explosion, which is the abusive behavior. And this can be any of the abuses that I mentioned before, but an abuse takes place. And then it comes back around to the honeymoon phase with the I'm so sorry, I love you, I'll never do it again, or you just made me so angry that I couldn't stop myself, which is just manipulation, and everything above. So that's definitely the cycle, and people find themselves going around this kind of circle over and over and over again. And so in the beginning of relationships, it's usually like once a year or once every couple months, and then you find yourself starting to go through this cycle faster and faster and faster, until some people go through this cycle multiple times within a day. They're just so used to that coming back around that this is normal for them, and they're like waiting for the explosion to happen so that things can be happy again.
How long does each cycle last? So let's just say you're going through the honeymoon phase. How long is that?
It honestly depends on what the relationship is. So like I said, if you've been doing this for a while and this is normal for you, then you can go through this cycle multiple times in a day. And this is why it's why we find that it's so important when we're working with folks, when we're doing like advocacy with law enforcement, is that when law enforcement shows up on the scene and it's like it's difficult to have those conversations because they've already made up, right? And they're no longer telling you what's going on. It's because they're already back to the honeymoon phase. They've already hit the I'm sorry, I won't do this again, don't you love me, I love you. So by the time somebody shows up to be like, hey, what's going on? They're like, nothing happened. We love each other.
We just argued.
Yeah.
Most couples. Yeah, we get
exactly.
that a lot.
Yeah, it just got a little out of hand. Maybe it was the neighbors that called, but like, no, we're good. But you know that there's something more there. But because you can't get the information, you're just going to like, okay, well, I did what I can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think people stay? And if that cycle is continuous, why do they stay in that relationship?
Yeah, there's so many reasons. And this brings me to the second cycle of violence
Is it all just because they're wanting to go back to that honeymoon phase, or?
Some of it is that, definitely. The other part of it, so there's so many reasons. There's 101 reasons why people stay, right? There's so many things. But the next part is the next cycle, and that's generational violence. So if this was your parents' relationship and their parents' relationship, and so far back generations, that you think this is normal, how are you going to know any different, right? If this is what you see daily, how are you going to know that this is abuse? You think this is normal. And that's a lot of what we see for sure with the cycle of violence. Other reasons, though, there's so many things.
So it's a normalcy. Yeah. That they just think that, okay, well, we have a honeymoon phase now. Mm-hmm. I messed up, so I get beat up.
Yeah.
And then he says sorry, and then we're back to normal.
Yeah, exactly. I must have done something that made them so angry that they had to hit me to correct my behavior, or they had to show me what I was doing was wrong. And so now we're happy again, and everything is fine, and everything is great. For sure. Definitely. That's a lot of what we see. But there's so many reasons why people stay. Some of it is financial abuse if they have all the money, or they control all the money. Even if you do work, they take your paycheck every week. Things like that. Or just love. Love is a great reason to stay. And if you're used to this cycle, you always remember what things were like in the beginning when you guys were happy and in love, and you get a glimpse of that every honeymoon period. So you're like, this is what I live for. This is what the relationship is supposed to be. So this is what I'm going to hold on to.
I think working in law enforcement, I think the biggest thing that I've heard is the financial reason of why they stay. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, and I'm not, singling out male abusers and female abusers, but mm-hmm. most of the time it's the male that's providing for the family, and they can't leave because the female isn't working, has taken care of the kids. Mm-hmm. So that makes it difficult for them to leave. Yeah, definitely.
All of that is right on the nose, and that is a lot of what we see. Sometimes it's when they got together, both parties were working, and then when they decided to have a family, one stayed home to take care of the kids, to make everything a little easier, a little more close to home, and then that's when things got a little more controlling and abusive. They couldn't spend the money on anything without permission. They're only given cash to go to the grocery store so that they can't spend anything on themselves. Things like that, where they have no choices, they have no options. And then when you're looking at married couples, things like insurance comes into play. So like, what if you depend on their insurance to handle your medical needs? So then it's going to be even harder. There's so many things that keep people in these relationships, for sure.
Now, this is less likely if it's a couple from, like, in a relationship that's somebody from high school or maybe even college. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. I think, like I said, in law enforcement, this is what we see the most as far as the monetary, of why they stay in a relationship.
And then when it comes to teens, like reasons people stay, a lot of it is like peer pressure or social status, and not just like coming from their peers. Sometimes it's their families too, because abusers don't abuse everyone, right? Because then everyone would know that they're a monster. So they pick and choose who they're abusive to or who they're aggressive to or who sees this side of them. So you're dating someone that everyone thinks is the perfect person, and everyone's like, why would you leave that relationship? Like, clearly you guys are the perfect couple, because they don't see what's happening behind closed doors. So that's another reason why teenagers stay. Or social status. Like, what if they're dating the most popular kid in school? Like, that still has its impact in like teenage society for sure.
So changing gears a little bit, what are the signs that teens or parents should look for in somebody that's in an abusive relationship?
Sure.
So parents or maybe your friends may be going through it, or what are some of the signs that stick out?
So there's a few things that we like to think of. So like red flags in general for just abusers. It's people that don't take accountability for their actions. There's always an excuse, right? That's definitely a red flag, but there's so much more. Actually, I want to ask you a question. So when you think of like trauma responses, what do you think of?
Trauma, like somebody hurt?
Yeah, if somebody's experienced a trauma, like what do you think of?
In my field, it's usually somebody that's bleeding, got cut, stabbed, shot.
But like reactions to trauma, like what do you think of? Like the experience has already happened, and like what's their response to that? Like depressed or jumpy, or what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess depression.
Yeah.
Will come into play.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else comes to mind?
No, I mean, I just think, obviously if you're dealing with, you're going to feel grief. You're going to feel like, why me?
Yeah.
I guess.
So many things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so many things. So the stack of cards that I brought with me are actually all trauma responses.
Okay.
So there's 75 different trauma responses in this little deck of cards here. And so there's different things. There's behavioral reactions, and this is things like crying or feeling like you're alone and nobody else is going through what you're going through, or lying, or being disruptive in school, right? Problem kid behavior. And it's like, are they a problem kid, or have they just gone through something? Brain and thinking reactions. So this is thinking that everything is your fault, when in reality, it's never a survivor's fault for what they experienced, right? Nobody asks to be abused. Right. Feeling reactions like sad and hopelessness. And also one that people don't really think of that I think is really important for parents to know specifically is body reactions. So things like chronic headaches or stomach aches or body pains. And it's just like, oh, like you're just a kid, like you're fine. But it's like body pain is such a huge reaction to trauma. So when you have a kid, like if you're a teacher and you have a kid that just always has a stomach ache and you're like, why do you always go to the office? Like you just don't want to be in class. Maybe there's something more. Maybe that kid has gone through something or is going through something that you don't know about.
That's very, very interesting. I've never even would have thought any of that stuff, because I'm just kind of like, not that I'm one side, but I'm just like, okay, I don't really dive into, okay, what, because we go to the call. As soon as we're done, we're done. Like, we're not going to go back and be like, okay, everything okay? Because, we should, but...
You don't have the capacity for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's not your job. That's like my job. Yeah. Hey, what do you need? Like, are you feeling all right? Like, okay, like, do you need some counseling? Like, how are you feeling? Do you want to decompress from what's going on? Like, talk to me about it, what's going on. For sure. And that's not something that a lot of people think about, that trauma has so many responses. And you're like, okay, is this trauma? Is this teenage behavior? Are like people just acting wild for no reason? I mean, chances are there's a reason for the way people are acting, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You got me on that. That's pretty good.
Definitely. And that's kind of like a big thing that for parents to look out for. Like, if you see sudden changes in behavior, sure, sometimes teenagers are just like learning to be people in this world. So sometimes there's going to be a little more pushback than you would have seen like before when they were younger. But sometimes it's maybe they're going through something and they just haven't talked to you about it. And that's why it's so important to foster those relationships with your kids, to make them comfortable to talk about these things. Because if you're going through an abusive relationship, maybe your parents don't even know that you're dating. Maybe they're like, you can't date until you're 18 or 17 or whatever, and you have a 15-year-old that's really going through it, but they're afraid to tell their parents because they don't want to get grounded. Whereas I'm sure the parent is more concerned that their kid is being abused than them getting in trouble for dating before they were allowed to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does one go about to support these survivors from the domestic violence or sexual violence or whatever?
Yeah, for sure. So a few things that I like to say is validate their experiences, listen to what they have to say, and then actually hear them and be there to support them. But also, I say that with a disclaimer, listen if you can. Not everybody can listen to trauma experiences and just be okay, right? Some of us don't want to hear that our loved ones are really going through something because we know that we can't handle it, or we've had similar experiences and it's going to trigger us. So many reasons. So if you know that's going to be your response, then let the person know so that they don't spill their guts for you and then you don't know how to respond, right? But then also letting them know that it's not their fault. That's a big one. Nobody asks for these things to happen, like I mentioned before. And then refer to supportive services. So over the Alliance, we can help with a lot of things. If you're not sure, give our hotline a call anyway. And that way somebody can like walk you through whatever's happening, and then you know if we can help you or if we can refer you somewhere else that can.
All right. Now, can you talk a little bit about the vicarious trauma?
Yeah, for sure. So I was thinking about this because a lot of people ask, like, what sticks with me the most? Like, what do I carry with me? And one of the things that we do, that we work so hard on at the Alliance, is making sure that we're okay as staff, because we can't do our job if we're not in the right headspace, right? You can only hear so much before processing to make sure that you're still okay to do your job. So we make sure that we're always checking in with each other, that everything is good, that everything is solid. But I think the thing that sticks with you the most that I carry with me is all of the resilience that I see on a daily basis from so many survivors that I work with. If I'm working with them directly, or if it's one of my colleagues, it's just there's so much resilience and healing and processing. And that's like a huge takeaway that I want people to remember, is that there is healing after whatever you've experienced.
Can you give an example without mentioning any names of someone who you're like felt that they were like, okay, they're never going to get out of this relationship, but then they were like, wow, they got out of it?
I don't want to say that because I think everyone has the possibility to grow and heal and move forward. But what I will say to that is, just so that everyone's aware, because that is something that we hear a lot about, it's that they just keep going back. This person is hopeless. When on average, it takes a survivor 7 times to leave before they actually stay gone. So think about that friend you have that just keeps going back, that brother, that sister, whoever it is that keeps going back into this abusive relationship, that you're like, come on, snap out of it. When are you going to see? Maybe they just need the 7 times to really see what's going on and then be done with it.
As far as your experience, I mean, what in some of the relationships, like, what was that turning point where they actually were able to leave the 7th or 8th time? Like, what was the last straw for them?
Sometimes it was that they finally realized that they couldn't control what was happening. So going back to why people stay, so much of it is that love for this person, because you remember what things were like when you first got together. And so you want to hold on to that honeymoon phase. But then once you get to a point where you recognize that you're not in control of this person's behavior, and no matter how well behaved you are, no matter what it is that you do for them that they're requesting, you can't be their everything to keep them in a stable place, because that's not your job. It's not your position to be, and they are in full 100% control of their actions, whether you want to believe it or not.
We talked a little bit earlier about the normalcy that maybe the individual going through the violence has seen it in their family and think like, okay, it's okay, this is what life is supposed to be like. Do you find it that the people who are in that situation, it's harder for them to leave the relationship if they feel that this is normal?
Oh, for sure. Because it's like learning a whole new it's like learning a whole new belief system, right? If you think this is normal, and let's say you're only walking through our doors because you had a friend that was like, I don't know about this. And then you're like, well, it's normal for me and my family. Like, what are you talking about? Then it's like opening your eyes to, has everything that I experienced been abuse? Which is just a whole nother thing that some people aren't ready to hear, right? So, I mean, sometimes it takes a couple tries. We have people that walk through our doors and then disappear and then come back a couple months later. And then the same thing until they stick with us and they're ready, because it's their journey to take. We can't force our services. We wouldn't anyway. We're really big on giving back the autonomy, making it their choice on their healing, because it's them experiencing these things.
So who are these? Well, for example, let's just say I have a friend who's being abused. She doesn't want to come forward. However, I go to you and tell you, hey, my friend is being abused. What would your next step, what would it be?
So I can't reach out to somebody unless they reach out to me first. So in a situation like that, I would give you resources and like tips that you can say, things so that you understand how abuse works and what to look out for and what is considered abuse and ways that you could talk to people, and also just going over what our services are. Our services are 100% confidential. I can't tell you something even if I wanted to. It's against the law. For me to even talk to law enforcement, I need a release of information from the client saying that I can speak to you about what's going on. So recognizing that they can talk to us about anything and there's really nothing that we can do with it. Our case management team as a whole, none of us are mandated reporters. So feel free to say anything to us, and that stays with us unless you don't want it to.
Right. Yeah. And okay, let's just say now I'm going through domestic violence. What services will be available to me if I was in high school or even in college as a teen?
Yeah.
What would you be able to provide for me?
Yeah, so case management for one is a huge thing, and this can be everything from a basic safety plan to helping you with the restraining order process to getting you into emergency shelter, depending on what's best for your plan, right? There's also like housing services. So let's say that the place that you live is no longer safe because they know your address, so getting you relocated, things like that. There's also our chat team, like I mentioned, so therapy services for folks, which is super important for the healing process that people don't understand. It's, do you have the right coping skills to go through this on your own? Some people do. Not everybody needs counseling, but it's definitely recommended for so many folks because it's learning how to process and cope through everything that you've experienced.
So at any point, if I was a victim of domestic violence, would I be turned away? Because I know, like, I'm going through my 7th cycle right now, and this is my 7th time reaching out to you.
Yeah. No.
I would still get the same services.
You would still get the same exact services. We would treat you exactly the same as if this was your first time coming in. Because we recognize that this is something that people go through often, and we want to make sure that we are always available to service as many people as that need us. So, yeah, you'll never be turned away. There's no issues. You should be good to come through anytime.
All right. And then we'll just end the show with this: is what would you say to teens who are in a relationship or violence is present?
Yeah, to teens, I would say give us a call. That what you're experiencing isn't normal and it doesn't have to be your reality. And there are folks always available to assist and answer any questions and then help with whatever healing process is needed.
All right. And do you have that number where they can reach you?
Yes, I do. So the Alliance outreach number, this is like the business number, so like 8:30 to 5:30. It's 661-322-0931. And then our 24-hour hotline is available 24 hours. They will always be available to take your call and walk you through basic services, answer questions, and then basic referrals if needed. And that number is 661-327-1091. All
right. Well, Alyssa, this has been an eye-opener for me. You did. Not only did we invite you with all your knowledge, but you actually educated me.
Awesome.
And I hope that whoever's listening, takes what you say. And if somebody is in a situation where they need to get out of it, we hope they listen to what you had to say today, and hopefully they get some help and get out of that situation.
Yeah,
so again,
definitely.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me, for sure.
Again, this is linked. the podcast where we link the community with known issues that affect our community and those around us. I'm your host, Jose Madrigal. Until next time, on Linked.